Turmoil in the Middle East continues. It's been over a year since the barbaric terrorist attacks on Israel, and Hamas still holds over 100 hostages in captivity. In the meantime, Gaza has been flattened. Thousands of Palestinian civilians have been killed, and the IDF tries to continue to eliminate the Hamas terrorist group. Tensions with Hezbollah have also boiled over, extending the conflict into southern Lebanon. If that weren't enough, Iran has also launched about 200 missiles on Israel at the beginning of the month in retaliation for Israel's assassination of key figures, including Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. Now we await the Israeli response, which could embroil the Middle East into a regional war. And now joining me to discuss where we are headed from here is the Israeli Minister of Economy and Industry, Nir Barkat. Hello, sir, and thank you very much for joining us tonight on World News.
Good evening, Don. Thank you for hosting me.
Yes. Now, first of all, I'd just like to start off with the hostage situation. Could you perhaps tell us how the negotiations, if they are continuing, and does the government have an estimate as to how many of these hostages are still alive?
Yeah, mind you that 250 hostages were taken with pajamas from their beds. These are civilians that created no harm to anybody. And the invasion of the terrorists to Israel and taking the hostages is a huge violation of anything. It's more than a war. We have not seen atrocities like we've seen October 7 since the Holocaust. Now, we demand our hostages back. Today, there are 101 hostages in inhumane conditions in the tunnels underneath the ground. They're keeping them the Hamas is keeping them in inhumane conditions. Nobody to talk to right now. The Hamas leadership probably wants to see the escalation in the region. And unfortunately, we find it very difficult to negotiate with anybody on the other side. We're talking about monsters. They're psychopaths. And to negotiate to release the hostages is very challenging. All Israelis, we do everything we can to bring the hostages back, but unfortunately the situation is far from being over at this point. We'd like to see it settled, but it's probably, unfortunately, it's going to take some time.
So currently no talks on the return?
To the best of my knowledge.
Okay, now let's address the elephant in the room.
Yep.
When should we expect Israel's response to Iran and the barrage of missiles that it launched on your country?
Well, Don, let's better understand the geopolitics. Iran wants Israel eliminated off the map. That's their charter. They have an evil alliance with Qatar, and they use the proxy strategy to try and strangle Israel with Hamas in the south, Hezbollah in the north from Lebanon. They have the Houthis and other jihadi Muslim Brotherhood cells around the region, in Iran, in Iraq, and in Syria. They even launched a direct attack on Israel with 200 ballistic missiles. And they're trying to, at the same time, create a bomb, a nuclear bomb, in order to use it. They want to destroy and eliminate the state of Israel. And by the way, we're not the only ones. The moderate Arab states are in line. They call us the little Satan. They call the US the big Satan. Europe is somewhere in the middle in that line. And we're not just fighting our own war against the jihadi terrorists. It's a war of the free world. And we understand that very well. It's a regional war planned by Iran. This is the first, we're already in war with Iran using their proxies. So the challenge we have is how do we take those proxies apart? The invasion by Hamas on October 7 is the plan of Hezbollah. They have the exact same plan, but with bigger force, to invade the northern border. Mind you that we have 70,000 Israelis displaced from their home in the northern border until we take that infrastructure of Hezbollah apart and until we hit Iran again. The strategy of President Kennedy in the Cuban Missile Crisis was that if, God forbid, the Soviets use their weaponry from Cuba, it'll be answered with a missile to Moscow. So the world has to understand that we have to take on that evil alliance between Iran, Qatar, and the others, and expand the peace process, expand the Abraham Accord to include the Saudis, Indonesia, and other moderate Arab states.
What would this response with Hezbollah look like? Would it look like something similar to what we've been seeing in Gaza?
Well, it's different, but here's the point. The UN decided on 1701 so that the UNIFIL would be between Hezbollah and the terrorists and Israel. Well, that failed because Hezbollah today is sitting on the border. On the villages they built, they took the Hezbollah terrorists and told them, go build bases right on the border and live there. Now, on every village in the southern part of Lebanon, which is right next to the border of Israel, you've got huge investments of terror and cells of terror that are just waiting for an order to invade Israel. We have to take that apart. With all due respect to UNIFIL, they're certainly not an enemy of Israel, but they were useless in the process because Hezbollah totally ignored them, and are sitting on the border. We have to further them away from the border. And the idea of any kind of solution in Lebanon in the future is to have this perimeter that they cannot enter. And right now we're just saying to our friends in UNIFIL, shy away, move aside so that you don't get hurt, because we have no quarrel, of course, with the UN or the UNIFIL. We want to make sure that the terrorists of Hezbollah are moved away from the border. And we have to defend. We have to bring back our 70,000 displaced people that for a full year are not at their home because of that threat.
You mentioned Iran and its proxies. In this part of the world, we see Russia as the primary threat. In the Middle East, you see Russia having a hand in cooperation with Iran. Does Russia pose any kind of threat to Israel's security?
I don't think so. We're focused on our enemy. Russia is not an enemy of Israel. They have their own challenges, and naturally they've supported throughout the years the enemies of Israel. But we are focused on Iran and the proxies on the bad guys. In the Middle East, you learn to be really bad with the bad guys, but on the other hand, really good with the good guys. Mind you that Israel has 40 years peace with Egypt. We've demonstrated that we know how to create peace with what was the biggest enemy of Israel, Egypt. And we have 25 years peace with Jordan. We have 4 years peace with the Abraham Accords. And there's certainly proof, and actually Iran admitted to pushing the trigger, deciding on the date, the time, the October 7, to derail the expansion of the Abraham Accords with the Saudis, which I think all of us are interested to expand the Abraham Accords and then influence the Palestinians to join the Abraham Accord into the future. But that goes through winning the war. We have no choice. We have to eliminate the terrorist, the radical Islamic the regime headed by Iran. We have no choice, and we need the support of our friends here in Europe and all over the world. We'll be considerate as possible to make sure that minimal collateral damage is made. Of course, we have no quarrel, not with the people of Lebanon, not with the Palestinian in Judea and Samaria or in Gaza. We have issue with the radicals and the terrorists that we have to make sure they lose this war.
And Iran stands behind Hezbollah, Hamas. What is this response going to look like against Iran? There have been reports that Netanyahu told President Biden that the strike would not include nuclear or oil targets in Iran. Is that the type of response that we should expect?
Do you think I should answer you live here?
I do.
Well, maybe you expect it, but certainly I don't think it's prudent for us to discuss the response. But it's very, very clear that Iran has to pay a heavy price for their aggressiveness, from their jihadi approach. And again, this is not just our interest. When we talk to our friends in the region and in Europe, everyone understands that Israel has the right to defend itself. And we have the right to offensively target our enemies that are trying to wipe out Israel. And we will do that not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of the free world.
You have previously said that Iran's nuclear targets, this could be the only chance to strike those targets. In response to this, 2 attacks now that has been launched against your country. Do you still believe that?
Well, I believe that they're going to be surprised, and I prefer not to discuss the details until we demonstrate what we actually mean.
We have upcoming U.S. elections. We have Democrats and Republicans vying for the top spot in the United States. The United States has apparently told Israel that weapons supplies to your country is at risk if you don't address the Gaza humanitarian crisis in the next 30 days. Will this have any bearing on what is to unfold?
We will stay bipartisan. We don't get involved in internal politics in the United States. We'll get along with anybody that gets elected. It's strategic because we share the same value, they share the same ideas. Unfortunately, we have the same enemies and the same partners. We value life, and we will fight the radicals and the bad guys. And we'll find a way to work in a bipartisan way with whoever gets elected in the United States.
Well, Minister Barkat, I thank you very much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for watching, and stay with us for more here on TVP World.